called by pollsters.
If I did, I wouldn't answer. I'm busy.
You know how polls are done? I'm going to get myself
Please.
in trouble. So I really don't believe too much in it. So,
well, 2016 taught a lot of people about the ineffective.
Well, they were very
use of polls.
ineffective because I thought I was doing well. I'd go to a place and I'd have 30, 40,000 people. Hillary would go, they have 500 people, and they tell me I'm going to lose. I said, why am I going to lose? I had 40,000 people. She had 200 people. But, you know, I have a theory. These pollsters, they charge you a lot of money, too. You know, they charge you $500,000 to do some stupid poll, and they interview like 251 people. I don't think they interview in many cases. I don't want to get myself in too much trouble.
You think it's bullshit?
I think they sit there, they make a deal, they get $500,000, and they say, Trump's leading 51-49. They announce it, and everybody says, oh. Do you understand? I don't think they. I think in a lot. Look, I'm a very common sense person. I think that they probably don't always poll. Some of them probably never poll. What's the difference between 49-51 and 47.5?
Well, it's also a tiny percentage of the population. I don't think it's representative of the overall population. I just don't think
I don't know of one person in my whole life that ever got called by a pollster.
Exactly. That's my point. So here's my question.
But I shouldn't say that because I'm doing really well in the polls.
But I think that's...
So this week I happen to believe in a verse. I only believe them if they're good. No. I like them this month. But no, I honestly believe that there's probably a lot of fraud. I had a poll, Washington Post, ABC, in the Hillary thing on Wisconsin. They had me down 17 points the day before the election. I knew it was wrong because I had a rally. I had 29,000 people at a racetrack, and it was like 0 degrees, Wisconsin. And they had me down 17 points. In other words, you had no chance. And I won. And I called up my pollster, who's a good guy, good guy. And I believe he's legitimate, and some of them are, some of them aren't. I said, tell me, why did they have me down so much? I mean, nobody's going to believe them the next time. They said they don't care. When you're down 17 points, people are going to stay home. They're not going to vote.
Right.
Because they're going to say, I love Trump, but I'm not going to waste my time. It's cold out. I said, but why don't they make it 4 or 5? He said, at 4 or 5, they're going to go and vote. At 17, they're not going to go and vote.
So
think of it, I was 7. This is the Washington Post, ABC.
All right, folks.
I was down 17
points
in Wisconsin, and I won. It's crooked stuff.
There's a lot of crooked stuff, and I wanted to talk about that too, because one of the things that people talk about with you is the denial of the results. And I think J.D. Vance did a brilliant job the other day when he was being interviewed, and they asked him, did Trump lose the 2020 election? And he turned it around and said, was there legitimate election interference in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story on social media? And was that a concerted effort?
Well, they say it made 10-point difference, and I lost by one tenth of a point.
Well, it is.
They say it was 22,000 votes.
Go ahead and pause this. Folks, we have come quite a long way. This impromptu live stream is mainly just to document some of the recent news postings before the big day, November 5th, 2024 U.S. presidential election. We're at a point in the sand. So many narratives reach their conclusion tomorrow, and so many new narratives spring open. Multiple universes of possibility that we can't see on this other side of that chasm. We'll see that side soon enough. So just review some things with you. We are living in a timeline where this actually occurred. The individual who was president for 4 years from 2016 to 2020, who many had lauded as one of the greatest presidential leaders in U.S. history, this individual narrowly escaped ending of it all just months ago. We were treated to this trajectory of that discipline.
Take a look what happened.
This actually happened. We're in this timeline. You have to recall, just with so many events that had transpired since this point just a couple of months ago, we really haven't had the time just to reflect on how amazing this was, that this man was spared. And so this is a big part of the meaning of tomorrow. Will the effect of this miraculous salvation, will we see its after effect in the election of a true leader to continue on and bring this nation out of the depths it's heading? We have this interview. We have Joe Rogan interviewing Elon Musk. In a post today, it says, "The great and powerful Elon Musk. If it wasn't for him, we'd be effed." He makes what I think is the most compelling case for Trump you'll ever hear, and I agree with him every step of the way. For the record, yes, that's an endorsement of Trump. Enjoy the podcast. So Joe Rogan, the day before the election, gives his own understood endorsement to the leading candidate. Joe Rogan, currently the largest podcast in the world.
To not be violent. That's
Yes.
crazy.
Crazy.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
Don't you think they'll listen to him?
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole point? They listened to him and created violence in the first place? That's what you think. That's what
Yes, exactly.
you're accusing him of.
Right.
And then there's the fact that we know that there was agents in the crowd that were agent provocateurs that were encouraging people to do illegal shit.
Yes.
We know that for
Yes.
a fact. This
Yeah.
is not
My boss.
that. It was
Let's take
always
back
the big
Republic.
Alex Jones type tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, because Alex proposed that back at the World Trade Organization protests. I believe we're in Seattle in the 90s. And they sent in agent provocateurs, started smashing things, lighting things on
Yeah.
fire. Now all of a sudden a peaceful protest is no longer peaceful.
Right.
They move in the cops, they shut everything down. They had it set up where it was a no protest zone, where you couldn't even have a pin that
Yeah.
had the WTO with a red line through it. They wouldn't let you go in through to go to work. So you couldn't protest, you couldn't exercise your First Amendment rights. You couldn't even like have a peaceful protest, a fucking sticker on your car. You couldn't
Right.
have that. It's crazy.
Absolutely. It was crazy.
So no, I think we're very much at a fork in the road in destiny, you know, I mean the reason I did the Twitter acquisition was like, it's like, man, if I don't do this, I think we're screwed. Is the issue?
Well, if you
It-
didn't
it-
do it, no one else was going to do it because it
Yeah.
wasn't a financial winner. It was kind of a crazy move.
It's a crazy move. I mean, the thing was way overpriced, you know, like long term, I think we can ultimately make it a win for investors. But boy, this is a hard way to make a living.
Well, there's
type of
also a
thing.
concerted.
And Elon Musk took that step, purchasing Twitter, creating a bastion for free thought, where at the time, the internet seemed to suggest much smaller sites such as Rumble, Odyssey, being the only bastions left, and the even smaller Truth Social. But by expanding X, the purveyors of propaganda to be seen could not hide from the eyes of those who are watching and paying attention, the eyes of those who would choose to counter their lies with truth. We're living in this reality where there's a mugshot of the leading candidate for president that looks like this. Seriously. Somehow this is real. It actually looks like this. It's like something out of a movie. Yet here we are. We're in this reality where Special Counsel John Durham concludes FBI should never have launched a full Trump-Russia probe. The probe that plagued all of that guy's first term as president. That was all that you could pretty much hear about in the news. Colony against Trump unrighteously due to a politicized federal investigative unit. So here I am on the Gateway Pundit page, just seeing what the stories are for future posterity for me to look back upon maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It's a day that none of us will live to see again. This is that final day before everything changes. I'm quite optimistic, having scrupulously, I guess that's not the right term, but to say studiously analyzed news clips, polls, to get a sense of how things are going to turn out. From the narrative storybook way of communicating, seems like the outcome we expect should occur if we're in a world where evil actions beget consequences of those actions, where you cannot scam and con people endlessly without final retribution. So these are the current headlines. W2H, Dominion Voting Systems accuses MI source-funded SOS Jocelyn Benson of peddling misinformation. Fringe, Kamala Harris leads a chant at Scranton, Pennsylvania rally, and no one joins her. Another huge win. Georgia Supreme Court reverses lower court's decision, blocks Democrat-run Cobb County from counting 3,000 absentee ballots after Election Day. RNC sues Milwaukee Election Commission for limiting poll watchers. She's cooked. Kamala Harris interview with popular web video series goes unaired after she offends Muslim host with a crazy comment about bacon. Harris campaign says results could take several days after Dems threaten to flood airwaves if Trump declares victory before all votes are counted. This is what we have to watch for. This protracted tallying where unseen manipulations try to alter the course of history. Developing, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton deploys Election Day rapid response legal team to monitor voting process, puts activist groups on notice. Just in, Pennsylvania judge smacks down Philly Source DA Krasner, refuses to block Elon Musk's $1 million daily giveaway. Hilarious. Nancy Pelosi humiliated on live TV while claiming Trump is mentally unfit for office. Victor reacts. The Kamala catastrophe at the southern border takes another life. Legendary NFL coach Bill Belichick interviews President Trump. Then we have the Drudge Report, the captured rag, transitioning from a neutral platform to an extremely far-left biased platform. Here is its main headline, just hours before the big day. Last days of dawn, shock poll. It's 2020 all over again. Harris +4. USA on the eve of history. Let's check out this article here. I followed Harris and Trump around North Carolina. It's clear who's going to win. From Eric Garcia. By the time these polls dropped, I may have been shocked at their margin, but I was not surprised that Harris' campaign has drawn another race. That's because I had spent much of Saturday following both presidential candidates around North Carolina on the final weekend of the campaign, and it became clear to me that Harris had all the momentum while Trump was grasping for straws. Oh boy. So I'll do this reading. Very special book. Was published before the turn of the 20th century. A book predicting a future with strange coincidental names such as the Dawn, Barron Trump. The book titled 1900 or the Last President by Ingersoll Lockwood. I'll start reading from this book today, and I'll likely not finish it today. I might read it tomorrow. during the counting and tallying of the votes. It's a book that describes a time that's strangely not so much unlike the present time we're living today. That was a terrible night for the great city of New York, the night of Tuesday, November 3rd, 1896. The city staggered under the blow like a huge ocean liner with plunges full speed with terrific crash into a mighty iceberg and recoils shattered and trembling like an aspen. The people were gathered, light-hearted and confident, at the evening meal when the news burst upon them. It was like a thunderbolt out of the azure sky. Altgeld holds Illinois hard and fast in a Democrat line. This elects Bryan President of the United States. Strange to say, people in the upper portion of the city made no movement to rush out of their houses and collect in the public squares, although the night was clear and beautiful. They sat as if paralyzed with a nameless dread. When they conversed, it was with bated breath and throbbing hearts. In less than half an hour, mounted policemen dashed through the streets calling out, "Keep within your houses, close your doors, and barricade them." The entire East Side is in a state of uproar. Mobs of vast size are organizing under the lead of anarchists and socialists, and threaten to plunder and despoil the houses of the rich, who have wronged and oppressed them for so many years. Keep within doors, extinguish all lights. Happily, Governor Morton was in town, and although a deep pallor overcame the ashen hue age as he spoke, yet there was no tremor in his voice. Let the 7th, 22nd, 71st regiments be ordered under arms, and in a few moments hundreds of messengers could be heard racing through the silent streets, summoning the members of these regiments to their armories. Slowly, but with astonishing nerve and steadiness, the mobs pushed the police northward, and although the force stood the onslaught with magnificent courage, yet beaten back, the dark masses of infuriated beings surged up again with renewed fury and strength. Will the troops be in time to save the city? Was the whispered inquiry among the knots of police officials who were directing the movements of their men. About 9 o'clock, with deafening outcries, the mob, like a four-headed monster breathing fire and flame, raced, tore, and burst rage into Union Square. The police force was exhausted, but their front was still like a wall of stone, save it was movable. The mob crowded it steadily to the north, while the air quivered and was rent with mad vociferations of the victors. "Bryan is elected! Bryan is elected! Our day has come at last! Down with our oppressors! Death to the rich men! Death to the gold bugs! Death to the..." Can't say that on YouTube. "Give us back the money you have ground out of us. Give us back the marrow of our bones, which you have used to grease the wheels of our chariots." The police force was now almost helpless. The men still used their sticks, but the blows were ineffectual, and they only served to increase the rage of the vast hordes now advancing upon Madison Square. The Fifth Avenue Hotel would be the first to feel the fury of the mob. Would the troops be in time to save it? A half cheer, a half cry of joy goes up. It was inarticulate. Men draw a long breath. Women drop upon their knees and strain their eyes. They can hear something, but they cannot see as yet, for the gas houses and electric plants have been destroyed by the mob early in the evening. They prefer to fight in the dark, or by the flames of rich men's abodes. Again, the cheers go up, louder and clearer this time, followed by cries of, "They're coming! They're coming!" Yes, they were coming. The 22nd down Broadway, the 7th down Madison Avenue, both on double quick. In a moment or so, there were a few bugle calls, and a few spoken commands rang out sharp and clear, and then the two regiments stretched across the entire square, literally from wall to wall, in line of battle. The mob was upon them. With this slender line of troops, could it hold such a mighty mass of men in check? The answer was a deafening discharge of firearms, a terrific crack, such as some thunderbolts made when they explode. A wall of fire blazed across the square. Again and again it blazed forth. The mob halted, stood fast, wavered, fell back, advanced again. At that moment there came a rattle as a huge knife in the distance. It was the gallant 71st charging up 23rd Street, and taking the mob in the flank, they came like a wall of iron, bristling with the blades of steel. There were no outcries, no cheers from the regiment. It dealt out death and silence, save when two bayonets crossed and clashed in the bearing down some deadly vigorous foe. As the bells rang out at midnight, the last remnants of the mob were driven to cover, but the wheels of the dead wagons rattled till daybreak. And then the aged governor, in response to the mayor's "Thank God we saved the city," made answer, "Aye, but the Republic." Chapter 2. Great has been the world's wonder at the uprising of Mr. Bryan's struggling masses in the city by the sea, and the narrow escape of its magnificent homes from fire and brand. Yet great still was the wonderment when the news was flashed across the land that Chicago did not stand in need of a single federal soldier. Chicago is mad, but it is a madness of joy. Chicago is in the hands of a mob, but it is a mob made up of her own people. Noisy, rude, boisterous, the natural exultation of suddenly enfranchised class, but bent on no other mischief than glorifying over the villainous and self-seeking souls who have ground the faces of the poor and turned the pitiless screw of social and political power into the hearts of the common people until its last thread has been reached, and despair pressed its lupine visage hard against the door of laboring man. And yet, at this moment, when the night air quivered with the mad vociferations of the common people, that the Lord had been good to them, that the wicked money changers had been driven out of the temple, that the stony-hearted usurers were beaten at last, that the people's William was at the helm now, that peace and plenty would be a few moons come back to the poor man's cottage, that silver was king, aye, king at last. The world still went wondering why red-eyed anarchy, as she stood in Haymarket Square with thin arms aloft, with wild mind and wilder gesticulation, drew no bomb dynamite from her bosom to hurl at the hated minions of the law who were silent spectators of this delirium of popular joy. Why was it thus? Look, and you shall know why white-robed peace kept step with this turbulent band and turned his thought from the red-handed pillage. He was there, the master spirit, to hold them in leash. He and he alone had lifted Bryan to his great eminence. Without these 24 electoral votes, Bryan had been doomed, hopelessly doomed. He and he alone held the great commonwealth of the West hard and fast in a democratic line. Hence he came as conqueror, as kingmaker, and very walls of the sky-touching edifices trembled as he was dragged through the crowd streets by the orderly mob, and 10 times 10,000 of the Democrat of his creatures bellowed his name and shook their hats aloft in mad exultation. You are our savior. You cleared the temple of liberty of its foul horde of usurers. We salute you. We call you kingmaker. Bryan shall call you master too. You shall have your reward. You shall stand behind the throne. Your wisdom shall make us whole. You shall purge the land of this unlawful crowd of moneylenders. You shall save the Republic. You are greater than Washington. You are a better friend of ours than Lincoln. You shall do more for us than Grant. We are your slaves. We salute you. We thank you. We bless you. Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. But yet, this vast throng of tamed monsters, this mighty mob of momentarily good-natured haters of established order, broke away from the master's control for a few brief moments and dipped their hands in the enemy's blood. The deed was as swift as it was terrible. There was but 4 of them, unarmed, on pleasure bent. At sight of these men, 1,000 throats belched out a deep and awful growl of hatred. They were brave men and backed against a wall to die like brave men, stricken down, beaten, torn, trampled, dragged. It was quick work. They were faced howling savages in the far west, painted monsters in human form, but never had they heard such yells have the throats of men, and so they died, 4 brave men clad in the blue livery of the Republic, whose only crime was that some months back, against the solemn protest of their master, their comrades had set foot on the soil of the Commonwealth and saved the metropolis of the West from the hands of the same mob. And so Chicago celebrated the election of the new president, who was to free the land from the grasp of the moneylenders. and undo the bad business of years of unholy union between the bartenders and sellers of human toil and the lawmakers of the land. Throughout the length and breadth of the South and beyond the Great Divide, the news struck hamlet and village like glad tidings of the new evangel, almost as potent for human happiness as the heavenly message of 2,000 years ago. Bells rang out in joyful acclaim, and the very stars trembled at the telling, and the telling over and over of what had been done for the poor man by his brethren of the north. And around the blazing pine knots of the southern cabin, and in front of the mining campfires of the far west, the cry went up, "Silver is king! Silver is king!" Black palms and white were clasped in a strange love feast, and the dark-skinned grandchild no longer felt the sting of the lash of his sire's shoulder. All was peace and goodwill, for the people were at last victorious over their enemies who had taxed and tithed them into the very living death. Now the laborer would not only be worthy of his hire, but it would be paid to him in a people's dollar for the people's good. And now the rich man's coffers will be made to yield up their ill-gotten gain. And the sun will look upon this broad and fair land, and find no man without a market for the product of his labors. Henceforth, the rich man should, as was right and proper, pay a royal sum for the privilege of his happiness, and take the nation's taxes on his broad shoulders where they belong. That ends chapter 2. Just going to check the comments here. Just going to check another thing here. All right, so we'll now resume here. I'll read chapter 3. The pens of many writers would not suffice to describe with anything like historical fullness and precision the wild scenes of excitement which, on the morning after the election day, burst forth on the floors of the various exchanges throughout the Union. Larger and more important than money center, the deeper, blacker, and heavier the despair which sank upon them, and upon the violent ebullitions of the protest, defiance, and execration had subsided. With some it seemed that the visions of their swift but sure impoverishment only served to transform the dark and dismal drama of revolution and disintegration into a side-splitting face, and they greeted the prospective loss of their millions with loud guffaws, indescribable antics of horseplay, and unseemly mirth. As the day wore on, the news became worse and worse. It was only too apparent that the House of Representatives on the 55th Congress would be controlled by a combined vote of the populous and free silver men, while the wild joy which the entire South welcomed the election of Bryan and Sewall left little doubt in the minds of the Northern people that the Southern senators would, to a man, ranged on the administration side of the great conflict into which the Republic was soon to be precipitated. Add to these 20 senators of the free silver states of the North, and a new president would have a Congress of the Republic at his back. There would be nothing to stand between him and a realization of these schemes, which an exuberant fancy, untamed by the hand of experience, and scornful of the leading strings of wisdom, can conjure up. Did we say nothing? Nay, not so, for the Supreme Court was still there, and yet Justice Field had come up fully up to the 18th milestone in a journey of life, and Justice Gray was nearly 70, while 1 and 2 other members of this High Court of Judicature held their lives with feeble grasp, even in due and orderly course of events. Why might there not come vacancies, and then, in spite of the nameless dread that rested upon so many of our people, and chilled the very blood of the country's industries, the new year 97 came hopefully, serenely, almost defiantly in. There was indescribable something in the air, a spirit of political devil-me-care, a feeling that the old order had passed away, and the Republic had entered into the womb of time and been born again. This sentiment began to give outward and visible signs of its existence and growth in the remote agricultural districts of the South and Far West. They threw aside their working implements, loitered about, gathered in groups, and the words Washington, White House, Silver, Bryan, offices 2 for 1, the South's Day, the reign of the common people, taxes, incomes, year of Jubilee, free coinage, Wall Street, Alsged, Tillman, Heffer, Coxey were whispered in mysterious way with head noddings and pursings of mouths. As January wore away and February slipping by brought Bryan's inauguration nearer and nearer, the groups melted into groups. And it was only too apparent that from a dozen different points in the South and North, West, Coxey armies were forming for the advance on Washington. In some instances, they were well clad and well provisioned. In others, there was little better than great hands of hungry and restless men, demoralized by idleness and wrought up to strange degree of mental excitement by the extravagant harangues of their leaders, who were animated with one thought, namely to make us, these vast crowds of silver pilgrims, as they call themselves, to back up their claims for public office. These crowds of deluded people were named silver pilgrims, for hundreds of them carried in hempen bags pieces of silverware and 99 cases of 100-plated stuff of little value, which unscrupulous dealers and peddlers had palmed off upon them as sterling, with the promises that once in Washington, the United States Mint would coin their metals into Bryan dollars, giving 2 for 1 in payment for it. While these motley armies marched upon the capital of the Republic, the railway trains night and day brought vast crowds of new men, politicians of low degree, men out of employment, drunken and disgruntled mechanics, farmers' sons, to seek their fortunes under the reign of the people, heelers and hangers-on ward bosses, old men who had not tasted office for 30 years and more, all inspired by Mr. Bryan's declaration that, quote, the American people are not in favor of life tenure in the civil service, that a permanent office holding class and not in harmony with our institutions, that a fixed term in appointed office would open to the public service to a larger number of citizens without impairing its efficiency, end quote. All bearing new bezels in their hands or across their shoulders, each and every one of them supremely confident that in the distribution of the spoils, something would surely fall in this share, since they were the common people who were so dear to Mr. Bryan and who had made him president in the very face of prodigious opposition of the rich men, whose coffers had been thrown wide open, all to no purpose, and in spite too of the satanic and truly devilish power that hell upon earth known as Wall Street, which had sweated gold in vain in its desperate efforts to fasten the chains of trust in the claws of soulless monsters known as corporations upon these very common people, soon to march in triumph before the silver chariot of the young conqueror from the West. That is chapter 3. There's some comments here. Kevin Bell asked, why is Elon Satan's champion? It's a good question. It's not clear to me if that's the case. I know he wore a controversial costume. Do you have a theory, Kevin Bell? Let's share. And Romney Rose replied, I don't think Elon does that. I'm here on the precipice, ready to march into the next day, as you all are. The day holds for us all, Lord only knows. I think we should march forward in confidence, knowing that with our aspirations and our actions up to this point, a victorious outcome seems likely. I'll play you out with a clip from the interview between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump.
But look, it was much more than that, and I appreciate J.D. Vance saying that. And by the way, I think he was a great pick. Do you like JD as a
I like
pick?
him a lot. Yeah.
You're allowed to say that. As,
No, I do. I like him
no,
a lot.
I think he's great.
I think he's a brilliant guy, and I think his ability to talk like a normal human being. You did my friend Theo Vaughn's podcast,
Right.
and he just did it.
How did he do
He
with
did great. He just
it?
talks
Is that
like
why
a
you
normal
called me
human
to
being.
do this? Is that why you called me to do this?
No, we were
Only
gonna,
kid-
I was.
He was a nice
Once
guy.
they shot you, I was like, he's got to come in here. It's all about timing. It's all about the timing.
Timing's
I think
good.
our timing's perfect. Do you even have a scar on your ear? You got anything on there?
I do.
What do we say? What do you got
So, right over here.
there? Oh, it's a tiny little
See,
mark.
it zicked right there.
Yeah. But it healed up pretty fucking good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's little. It's not like some of the wrestlers, some of the UFC fighters.
No, you didn't
It's
get
a little bit.
cauliflower
No. It was sort of like a top shot.
Mm-hmm.
The point of the bullet was a
Boy.
little of the ass, but you see the thing's taken off a little bit. But it makes me a tougher guy. You know the fighters. The fighters love their. Bo Nickel, he's a great fighter.
Yeah, I love Bo Nickel.
How's he going to do? I think he's terrific.
He's great. He's a fantastic
He was
fighter.
almost like undefeated in college.
He's a fantastic wrestler and one of the best mixed martial
When is
artists.
he fighting again?
He's fighting in Madison Square Garden in November.
Oh, that's going to be after the election.
Yep.
So I'll either go as president or I'll be depressed and I won't bother going. I really, yeah, I think they're having a fight right now.
One of the things that was fascinating also was the denial of the election results is a pretty common thing. Hillary Clinton famously denied that
Yeah.
she called you an illegitimate president, and she said that Russia put you in place.
Even though she conceded.
Yes.
She conceded the night of the election because she was beaten.
Yes, and it was a thing that was pretty common for people, especially Democrats, to deny the elections. There's been many of them. The Bush administration, the dangling Chads, all that stuff.
Well, look at these guys in Congress. All these sleazebags in Congress that are Democrats, they're still denying 2016. But now they don't so much because, they try and pin it on me. You don't hear them say.
But here's my
they
point.
denied it right up until the end.
My point is, this idea of election fraud is a forbidden topic, and you get labeled an election denier. It's like being labeled an anti-vaxxer if you question some of the health consequences that people have had from the COVID-19 shots. Oh my God, you're an anti-vaxxer. If you say, and what I say publicly, and I've said this a lot, it's not 0%. So if you ask me, what is the amount of election fraud in this country? Is it 0%? No one thinks it's 0%. I've never met one person, not a super liberal, progressive, far left person or a right.
It's really all how widespread it is. We may never know. Go and close this down. Thanks for watching, everyone. The Republic's at hand. Stay in prayer. We march forth across that chasm into the new world. Peace.